Hey again, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Discussions of Darkness. This week, I wanted to take a moment after our 10th episode, and I wanted to discuss a potential project that I've really thinking about pursuing, and that a lot of folks seem to be interested in. But I wanted to poll our wider audience and see whether or not it's something that regular viewers would actually want to check out. And for those who aren't sure what I'm talking about, if you check the rest of the channel's updates, you'll see that we have a lot of audio dramas, many of which are taken from the World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements that I've contributed to Azukail games over the years. There's stuff for Vampire, stuff for Changeling, stuff for Mage, and stuff for Geist now. But these little audio dramas are taken from the supplements that I've written, and they're kind of a dramatized version of the introductory stories in all of them. And something I've been doing the past 6 months or so is I've actually been tying these little vignettes together so that they create a longer, more connected narrative. And that seems to be something at least some listeners are really appreciating, and it's something I'm having fun with as a creator and as the writer. But there have been calls from at least a couple of people, particularly the fans of Changeling the Lost, who are wondering why I don't make larger episodes, why I don't make a bigger, more connected narrative. And the reason for that up until now has partially been proof of concept. I needed to prove that it was a thing people would be interested in and that people would listen to. The other part of it has, quite honestly, been funding. It is not due to a shortage of ideas, I can assure you on that. But there have been enough people who have asked that I thought I would just propose the project and see whether or not people get behind it. For those who are wondering, this would be what's called a Dark Pack project. This is something that Onyx Path has as kind of a fan content stamp you can put on it, letting folks know that you are not infringing on their copyrights, and it's just a thing you are putting together for the enjoyment of the community. And what I would like to do, this is my ideal scenario, is I would like to start with a season of a podcast which would be backed up on YouTube and various other platforms for folks to find it. I would start off the first part of Windy City Shadows, working title, with a story about the former Paladin of Shadows being called out of retirement. For those who are not familiar with Changeling the Lost, the Paladin of Shadows is the enforcer for the Fall Court. And this particular individual, Black Shuck, as he's been known for those who heard him name dropped in Whispered Words Sharpen Knives, still owes a favor to someone, and this favor is what requires him to put the mantle back on and do one last job for the court. So, a bit of modern fantasy John Wick for folks who are interested in that sort of thing. And my hope is that once we reach the end of that plot, which I have some notes on, but I have not sketched out entirely because it's a lot of time and energy for something I'm not certain will see the light of day and actually get made. But at the end of that plot, I would then like to jump off to another sphere that has been connected to that first story, where we follow different characters on their own adventures, but they're going to be affected by what happened in the previous season, so it'll depend on which characters can show back up, which events get referenced, things like that. And my hope is that if I can keep it going, if we can find people in the community who really like this sort of thing and who want to see it continue, I would start with Changeling, but I would then move into which other sphere folks vote on, basically, of whether you want to see Vampire, whether you want to see Werewolf, whether you want to see Mage or Geist, or even Promethean, or possibly Hunter, if folks decide that we need a clean house, though. If I had to choose as a creator, I would really like to end the series with Hunter, because that seems to be what happens when things get a little too ridiculous, but that's another topic for another day. Now, I mentioned funding, and that's the main reason this hasn't happened, because it takes a lot of time to write the scripts, it takes energy to get the cast together, to do recordings, to edit, to put in all the sound effects, to put together the video, even as basic as a lot of them are. And that's not a thing that you can just do for free in your spare time. This is a business and this is a job. So if that is the sort of thing folks want to see, there are a couple ways you can make it happen that don't require you just waiting till I have the spare time to work on it. First and foremost, YouTube has recently changed their monetization requirements. Up until recently, you needed 1,000 subscribers, which we did not have as a channel, You also needed 4,000 hours of watch time within the past year, which, for those who don't want to do the math, is 11 and a half hours a day. Particularly difficult when your content is measured in minutes rather than in hours. Now you only require 500 subscribers, which we do have, and 3,000 hours of watch time. 8.5 hours a day, I think. Maybe 8.25. Whichever it is. We only had about 864 when last I checked, which is less than 30% of what we would need to get to that goal. So if the channel were to get monetized, if people were to watch some of the playlists, share them around with their groups, bring in other viewers, other listeners, even have a watch party, leave us on in the background while you're doing chores, whatever it happens to be. Getting us over that goal would mean that I could then go to the publisher, and for folks who are wondering what I'm talking about, I might be the face of the channel to some people. This is not my channel. I'm just a contributor in much the same way I'm just a contributor to Azukail Games as a publisher. Adrian Kennelly is the fellow who runs things around here. But I could then go to Adrian and I could point at our numbers and I could show him our audience engagement, and that would be a thing that the company could at least partially fund going forward, depending on the ad revenue from all the people stopping in to view it, as a way to balance out that initial investment cost. And hopefully folks picking up more copies of the World and Chronicles of Darkness supplements we've put out, because once they're interested in the setting, they're interested in the story, maybe they want to get some of the fun things that I'm putting into the series and use them in their home games, whether it's characters or item write-ups, things like that. A secondary option for folks who are really interested, really engaged with this idea, and who want to see it happen is, would you be willing to kick in some of your own personal funds to make it go? Whether that would be as a Patreon, whether it would be on Kickstarter to get an entire season. That could be a thing we do if we can build enough energy, if we can get enough folks interested. And lastly, just if it comes out, will you be someone who watches, or will you be someone who shares and engages on social media, tries to get more viewers, things like that? Because we can do as much promotion as we want. People really trust when their friends tell them something is good and they need to check it out. But that's all I have for this idea. That's my elevator pitch to you directly as the audience. Is this something you want to see? Is it something you want to help make happen? And as I said, if you can help us get monetized as a channel, that will make it significantly easier to get some of those costs going. If you comment, share, subscribe, things like that, it makes the signal go a little higher, and it makes it easier for folks to see what we're doing. So before we go, down in the comments, let me know which sphere you would like to see, and what characters or scenes that have showed up in previous audio dramas that you want to see more of. Whether you want to see more about the Nosferatu Lord of Shadows, if you want to see what happens to Johnny Hammer and the Six Gun Saint, if you want to know what eventually happens to Jacoby, Amy Prism, any of the other changelings that have showed up, let me know, and then when I start penning episodes, I can make certain that they at the very least have a guest slot, and we can find out what happened with the rest of their story. But until next time, happy gaming, everybody.